when they hit around the 2 hour mark, a stormtrooper walked out. I didn't see, did he shoot the clock or something happened, but the clock breaks. They accused the stormtrooper of it. And they introduced this weird twist where the builders have to guess how much time is left. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. I am your semi-solo host today, Grinch, and today West and I will be diving into the world of Lego Masters. We'll be talking about the new season. If you're listening to this first thing when it releases Monday, that means there's a brand new episode for you tonight. Otherwise, if you are not in the United States, we will also be talking just about Lego Masters in general. So stick around and we'll get right into that topic. But before we do that, let's talk about some exciting Lego news. Exciting Lego news. All right, so as I mentioned up top, it will just be me. West will be here for the main topic, but I will be handling the news and the brick mail today. So going over the news, it was a pretty quiet news week. We got the prize machine officially announced and revealed. Well, officially revealed, I should say. There's the creator teddy bear gift with purchase now until the end of May. Gabby's Dollhouse had some reveals if you are interested in that. But really just wanted to spend the bulk of the time today talking about the prize machine. This is 1,343 pieces, retailing for $180. Comes out June 4th, and it features 16 minifigures. And I believe it was last week where I was talking about how, I think Lego's really starting to price these minifigures at a premium, because in this case, it does feel pretty overpriced for what you get, right? Especially from a build standpoint. But then when you start to factor in there's 16 minifigures, all of a sudden it's like, okay, if I assign like $4 to $5 per minifigure, that's $60 to $80 of value. If you're a price to part truther, then guess what? We're kind of right there price to part wise if you start adding a premium to the minifigure. So definitely fuel to my my hypothesis there. My hypothesis is fire. So definitely interesting. It looks pretty good. It's kind of a weird, I kind of feel like the fan design set had parts that looked better than the official set, and the official set has parts that look better than the fan design set, and somewhere in between would have been ideal. I was trying to see if they scaled. I think they scaled it down maybe slightly. I feel like the fan design was a little bit taller. But overall, it looks good. I think it's a very interesting idea. It's just, another one of those sets where I feel like the novelty of the set will wear off rather quickly, right? Kind of once you do it once or twice, yeah, it's kind of it, right? So definitely interesting to see how this one will do. But with the news out of the way, let's go ahead and move over to today's topic. Today's topic. All right, so today we are talking all about Lego Masters. Obviously, last Monday, we got the start of this new season here in the United States. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, kind of go into our first impressions, initial thoughts, what we think is going to happen for the season. And then we are going to talk just more about Lego Masters in general. So, West, would you like to do a quick recap?
All right, let's do it. First off, Grinch, thank you for taking the lead on the intro and building and whatnot as I take the Memorial Day weekend to reset with the family. Much appreciated. But let's recap this first episode. So, first episode of Lego Masters Season 5, right? Very exciting. They made a big to do at the beginning of the episode about twists, about
Mm-hmm.
things in store for the season. They teased Star Wars, they teased Batman, they teased Wicked. I think we saw a few other teasers. If you go back and watch the trailer, it looks like we're gonna have an episode where they're doing wearables again. It's like a dress. I think the next week's episode is wedding cakes.
Or tonight's episode.
Or tonight, yes, for the night that this episode airs on, tonight's episode, exactly. Uh, so it sounds like they're definitely putting a lot of effort. I know that they shared at least the audio of Will Arnett telling everybody that the contestants, the team members, were going to face off against each other. So that sounds really interesting and potentially different. We always have these different intros. It's sort of a toss-up. Will someone get eliminated on night one? It seems at this point like it's a 50-50 with the last few seasons. So we'll see.
I don't like it when they do that, because
when they
feel
eliminate somebody, or they save it?
When they eliminate somebody, just the first one. I mean, I don't like the inconsistency, because I just feel like I would be a nervous builder that would be overthinking everything. The first round, right? And then sometimes you just need just one build to kind of be like, okay, I'm here, and I'm still here. Let's go,
just something to get like your feet underneath you, and a feel for the competition and the pacing and everything. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong there. And I think it's sort of weird that they're inconsistent with it too, because I feel like every time we start the season, it's like, you're like, well, is someone going to get eliminated this episode or no? And it's such a toss-up that I don't know. It's like a weird twist that I'm not looking forward to. You know what I mean? Because it sometimes feels like the team that gets eliminated. I mean, in some cases, those teams that get eliminated early, they definitely feel like they deserve to get. It was a few seasons ago. You remember there was they were like the grandparents or something like that, and they just, I mean, totally sandbagged their build. And it was like, why are they even here if this is the quality of build that they put together?
Right.
Which I think speaks to your point of like, let everyone just kind of get their legs underneath them, get a feel for the show, get a feel for being in front of the camera, and then and who knows, right? Like maybe they do get a warm-up session ahead of time that's just not filmed. I don't know, right? So that's maybe something to ponder on. And
it would be great to get somebody on the show that we could ask some of these questions to at some point, huh?
That would be pretty neat.
That'd be cool.
So, but let's talk about this first episode real quick. So, it's announced pretty early on that it's a Star Wars episode, which is awesome. Very exciting.
Interesting though, it's the second time they've done Star Wars in other Lego Masters competitions outside of the US, but it's the second time they've done it in the US already.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's notable because there's been Marvel, Jurassic Park, and now Star Wars again.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I don't blame them, right? Like I think I wouldn't hate it if there was an episode every season first dedicated to Star Wars. There's so much you could do there, right? But I think it's an interesting take, and it's something we haven't visited since season 1, right? So
yeah, I guess it was season 1
because that was with Boone. Building.
God, he was robbed.
Yeah. But Star Wars, right? Planets. That's exciting. We see the Death Star show up at the point. I think it was like the second or third one that the top half of it blew up. I was like, why are they only blowing up the top half? And then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So it's planets, right? The challenge for the contestants is to take the bottom of their planet and build up. And so each one kind of looks a little different and features sort of a different biome, and they're asked to build it up and tell a story. I thought that was really cool. Things that stood out to me for this challenge: scale, right, would be very important. Story, certainly, you would want to tell something that was very exciting but also very cohesive, and you would want to try to keep that throughout your entire build. And then details, right? Details would be huge in this type of a build because, again, if you're building at scale, you either need to incorporate as much detail as possible using, relatively large pieces, or you need to try to sort of suggest as much detail as possible if you're going to do like a micro scale city or something like that. So I thought there were some really interesting aspects to this challenge where I thought people could really, really shine. Storied, right? That's kind of an easy one and a gimmick, but we know that there's 10 hours in the episode, so they start the clock. People go and pick their planets, and they kind of go off into their sides, their tables, and start building.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we get the ubiquitous introduction to the teams. And I leaned over to my wife and I said, pay attention to the teams that they really feature on this first episode, because generally that's one of those teams will get eliminated.
You're either winning or you're getting eliminated.
Yep. And that seems to be a trend on pretty much all of Lego Masters up until the point where they sort of cycle through everybody. And then
I think it's just a reality TV trend. Like there's only so much, there's 43 minutes in the episode. So it's like, we got to make sure we tell a story throughout. But like, for some reason, I feel like Lego Masters, when they do it, they just do it so obviously.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I was saying, like, I don't like it when they eliminate somebody at first, because like, shouldn't the story of this episode, the narrative should just be the introduction, right? And like getting you excited about the different teams, and then being like, okay, now, now that because we didn't get a proper introduction to every team too, right? We like half of them. So we're going to get the other half next week, but like, it's still going to be very obvious. Like when, if there's one team that wasn't introduced today, is introduced next week, but like not talked about, like they're going pretty far. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
And it was interesting because the teams that they didn't introduce, I noticed when they featured their builds at the end, they really didn't spend a lot of time on them either. And so that felt like they were just kind of glancing.
They like say the name and they're like, all right, West and Grinch. Yep, good job. All right, next up we got Ian and I forget the other one's name, but yeah, Ian and Sage.
Yeah. So when they hit around the 2-hour mark, a stormtrooper walked out. I didn't see, did he shoot the clock or something happened, but the clock breaks. They accused the stormtrooper of it. And they introduced this weird twist where the builders have to guess how much time is left. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. I'm not really sure what the point of that was, because watching the episode go down, right, you have a lot of voiceovers by Will Arnett going, they don't know how much time they have left, but then they show the clock and it flashes the time every so often. And so it's like, well, okay, if they're paying attention, which I'm sure one of them is glancing up at the point that this happens, they should be able to see the number flash in front of them. So that's, neat.
Well, I've gone on record saying I hate the Super Bowl halftime show because it's the only game of the year where the halftime is not 15 minutes. It's 30. Actually, is it a little bit longer? I'd have to double check. It is at least twice as long as a regular halftime. And you're telling me what should be the most competitive game of the year is played on a very different. I mean, you get twice the amount of rest at least between. Now,
Grinch, I'm gonna pause you right here. Where are you going with this? We're talking about Lego Masters Season 5.
I'm a big fan of competition and keeping it consistent and just letting the people compete on an even playing field.
I see.
And freaking people out, like just purely, there is nothing that adds to this show other than being a gimmick.
I mean, it's clock fatigue at its finest, right? And to the point of the fact that the numbers are still flashing makes me feel like that was a gimmick more for the audience than it was for the
we don't know. I mean, we won't know unless we talk to somebody who's. I mean, maybe they could have just had the clock going there, right?
Also,
and maybe they were updating them. Hey guys, you got an hour left. Hey guys, you got 30 minutes left. Just so you know, you got
some behind the scenes.
It might not be going, it might not be counting down, but like my guess is they're like, okay guys, 1 hour, just like he announced 1 minute or whatever. Yeah.
So here's my other take too, right? And I'm not trying to like completely undermine the magic of the show, But what would have stopped you from being like, oh, it said 2 hours on the clock. All right.
Oh, go grab
Current
my iPhone.
time.
Here we go.
Current time is 20:31. Okay, great. So at 22:31, time's up. So everyone understand that you have 2 hours. Here's, like what's it seems a little odd that that's the direction to take, and then odd that somebody wasn't just like, okay, hey, does anyone have a stopwatch?
Well, and I know, like, I'm not trying to be
Siri, set a
negative.
timer for 2 hours.
Like, I enjoy the show a lot, but that's one of those things where it's like, I'm not here to watch reality TV. I'm here to watch people build Lego.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Like,
mean, to your point,
so
right?
I
Like,
just don't care about that stuff.
the competition itself should be the forge, right? That is, creating that these creators are working against. And instead, when there's these gimmicks that kind of toss things up, you're like, but I'm not seeing them at their best. And I think, and I will make this statement, right? Which is, if you're somebody who gets anxious about this kind of thing, it automatically puts you at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to your point of like a level playing field, right? If there's anyone who is sort of predisposed to like clock anxiety, and then the clock goes away and they've been building for 8 hours, like, I'm sure
And
they
all
get.
I'll say is, if you don't think that's you and you're thinking, oh, well, they have a level playing field because everybody gets affected by it, I bet you, if you had a test and you took a test in high school or college or whatever, and the teacher said, okay, guys, 5 more minutes, and you said, what? I'm only halfway done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's exactly, I mean, yeah,
Right. It's the same sort of thing. No, the point you're bringing up is absolutely fair, right? Just like how people learn differently, right? Some people are visual learners, some people are audio learners, some people like to learn by doing something, right? Like, people have different strengths. We know that there's people who think really fast. There's people who think very slow, but also very accurately, right? Like,
Correct.
this is well documented. This is not, there was a really great episode of Revisionist History. It's a podcast, and they talked about the LSAT tests and how lawyers who go to the top law schools are all very fast and accurate thinkers, and that the test is really designed around them, and it's not designed around the slow and accurate thinkers. And so a lot of those lawyers don't end up going to the top law schools, and it was like a whole to do.
It's just like the SAT. You have to learn how to take the SAT test.
Right.
You're not learning the knowledge. You're learning the skills to like cope with the test.
Yeah. Which
you're like, okay.
Which always was so funny, right? And as an example of this, at the time when I was taking the SAT class, the class on how to beat the test, right? They said, hey, if it's a math problem, you can automatically eliminate the highest and lowest answer because they will never pick one of those answers. Their answer is always bounded by other answers. So you can automatically eliminate the highest and lowest. And
50-50.
Now dropped it to a 50-50% chance. Exactly. And so it's like silly things like that where it's like, oh, okay, as soon as you know the trick of like, it's never one or the other, then got it. So yeah, just dumb things like that.
Bringing it back to Lego Masters specifically.
Thank you, Grinch.
I think what I would like to see, right? I never try to offer up criticism without offering up a solution. The gimmick, the twist I would like to see is like, hey, you're doing this planet thing. And by the way, since we're on a planet, like, we want you to try to build it at a slope. Or like, we want you to try to, like, it's Lego Masters. Like, have the twist be something about Lego and not just like, hey, we're going to take away the clock after 2 hours. Be like, you have to have movement. Mm-hmm. You have to, the planet's balanced. What I was trying to say earlier is like the planet's balanced on that rope, right? That beam. We want to see an unbalanced planet.
Yeah.
We want to see one on an axis, right? Like, that's what bonus points if you do that. Like give them the challenge prompts of like, use the Lego bricks in this way, right?
That was interesting because there was the one team of friends, the dudes from Dallas and Austin, mm-hmm. who initially had a very off-balance planet, and then
with the
made
skyscrapers,
the decision,
right?
Yeah, to move them forward, balancing it out. And I thought, like, whoa, this team is thinking about balance, and I guarantee you there's other teams who are not. And then there was the two guys who created I think this was the teachers who created the planet with the academy, and it had the landing pad, and the landing pad was off kilter, but then they put a rocket motor on the bottom of it, trying to like imply that it was sort of trying to correct itself. And I thought that was really clever too, because it was like a visual way to be like, we know it's off balance, but like they're working on it, right? Like it was almost a meta commentary on
it helps tell the story.
Absolutely, right. It turns the balance of the planet into the story, right? Whereas it's not just an accident, or it might have been an accident, but now, as Bob Ross would say, it's a happy accident. And so I thought that was very funny to see, and really clever, and definitely thinking through things more so than like some of the other competitors were. Part of the challenge with this first episode, right, is because they have to bounce between so many different teams, you don't really get to get those details in the build. You don't get to hear the story. Whereas like later on, we're going to break down each episode and generally focus on one or two teams where they really describe what they're trying to build. And you see that little sketch model of what they're trying to build that somebody probably does in post-production. And then that, they focus more on teams later on in the season. And I think that'll get really interesting to see. So, just some other notes. I guess really, I don't know. At the end of the day, the clock thing, not my favorite. What about you?
Yeah, no, pass. And I think I know our episode notes, so I know we're going to get into this discussion later. So I will table the clock thing and the gimmicks for right now, and then we can talk about that later.
Yeah. So the episode ends, and we get the top two teams. The top two teams were Ben and Michael. They were the brothers from Indiana, and they built the droid factory planet, featuring the mountainside on one side and then the factory on the back side. And then the next top team was Ian and Sage. That was the brother and sister duo who did I called it the puppy planet, but it was the pet sitting dog planet that featured a giant water hydrant in the center of it, and then kind of had a story of dog sitting around it. And then we got our bottom two teams, and we saw a lot of stuff in the middle, Grinch. I was really impressed with some of the middle builds, actually, which sort of surprised me that they were in the middle, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The bottom two teams we got were Nick and Kendall, and Marcella and Krista. And it ended up being Nick and Kendall who were eliminated. But to be honest, I think Marcella and Krista were pretty close themselves based off of the feedback that Amy and
that was a 50-50 pure. I was like, yep, either of them are very, very similar mishaps, right?
Yep. And so let's talk about that, right? Top two teams. Anything else you want to kind of share about Ben and Michael or Ian and Sage's work? Obviously, we'll get to some of the bigger picture stuff in just a second. But so, for example, like I really liked the mountain that Ben and Michael built.
Yeah, I like the droid factory part.
I thought that was really clever, and the movements they included with two independent movements of those conveyor belts was really, really solid. I think and I don't know what pieces are available to them, right? I think in my mind, the only other thing that you could have done that would have been really interesting was those little tank tread pieces that are used that got used in like the Tetris machine, or that got used in they've used them in other builds, but you could have almost done like a coat rack kind of moving system like you see at a dry cleaners almost with that, to do like a hanging droid factory. That would have been kind of an interesting trick versus like a wider sort of conveyor belt from the bottom. But again, I don't know what they have available to them, and that's just me spitballing after thinking about it, and preparing for this episode. So, they're definitely under the gun when they're putting that together.
I think overall I wasn't like the biggest fan of this challenge.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you're essentially just like saying, hey, build a world on this plane, but like it's round and you don't have that much space. And by the way, it's going to be kind of a little topsy-turvy. Like I'd much rather, if you think about the other first episode challenges that they've done, it's a lot of cityscapes. I wasn't too fond of the one that they did last year with the whole boat thing. But they typically had done like an amusement ride or, you know, something kind of bigger, and then they all put them together to make a bigger thing. I prefer that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like this is just already a scaled down version of that. But then just even the like suspended planet, you can only see half of it, right? Like from a standing perspective, you can't, you're not looking over. I mean, with camera angles you are and stuff, right? But like from a building perspective, you're kind of looking directly at the thing,
Yeah.
and also from a judging perspective, right? And so that was kind of, overall, it was a little unexciting for me. But I will say the brothers build left me being like, oh, I want to see what these guys can do, right?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
know this is a little wonky, but like it's the first episode. They made me excited about like, okay, what can they do? And there was a
Yeah.
couple other builders that had that same impact, and I was hoping that they'd be in the top two. Whereas but they weren't. So
Well, let's talk about that. So we got Ian and Sage next, and we want to be very clear that like we aren't necessarily trying to criticize anybody. I do feel like the episode sort of set them up to be one of the bottom contenders, just in the way that they shared the story with Amy and Jamie, and then Amy and Jamie both expressed some reservation about it and said, "Hey, this is very Earth based, but we want you to get into Star Wars." And then I just personally didn't
they
think that
gave
what they
criticism,
did.
and then they were like, "Did you address the criticism?" And then they didn't really acknowledge that.
Yeah, and I don't feel like, putting helmets on the dogs, like the minifigure dogs. I don't know if that was like in my mind. I leaned over to my wife and I said, this is where they could do like space creatures. So instead of dog sitting, you're like Star Wars pet sitting, right? Like that could be kind of an interesting conception. And so, you have all sorts of weird animals running around this space, space planet or whatever. People love Lego poop, right? You could have like someone picking up like green poop from behind, or in like lime green or something goofy like that, right? There's so many things you could do to sort of whimsically approach that subject, but also take it out of this world in a way that I just didn't quite get from them. So I'm curious.
This is
What?
where I've struggled a little bit, and again, I know we're going to get into this. I've struggled a little bit with the US version. It's because sometimes I feel like story is outshines a lot of these other areas, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like, okay, if we got three areas of judging, like, did they make the brief? Is the story there? Is the technical ability there? Sometimes it feels like it's like 50, 25, 25, where it should be a third, a third, a third, right?
Yeah.
And so,
We don't see the rubric that they're using to grade these things on, and what
right.
ultimately stacks up as good, and I'd be curious how quantitative they are about it, right? Like, do they give them marks 1 through 5 across the 5 or 6 category rubric, or is it like, more just general impression, or what? I'm not going to throw anything out here like I think it was rigged or fixed, but to your point, it does seem like Amy and Jamie are valuing story. And I know we're going to talk about that in a second. So I want to kind of talk about some of the middle build. But before we do that, Grinch, I want to share kind of what I thought when I saw this challenge. I thought build mini scale city, right? Like build it up, make it look like the top of Cloud City at that cityscape, skyscrapers kind of a thing. Very like shiny urban. Now that sounds very maybe literal for the challenge. I was just thinking as we were talking, something you could do is put like part of the planet that got separated like in orbit on the top of it or something, and you could balance it appropriately so that it's like one piece of the planet's floating up above, and then you balance you balance the majority of your weight on the opposing side of it so it does stay balanced and it looks like it's floating over the city or something wild like that. That would feel very Star Wars to me in like a really cool way. It would be a very technical challenge, and to do that in a way that would be, you have to use like a lot of clear pieces, and I don't really know how you would ultimately execute that in a meaningful way, but that would be kind of my initial hack at it, because I think that would be really cool. And so for that reason, I really actually liked that J2DA city where they picked R2D2 and C3PO and used that color palette to then kind of build out their city. I thought that was really clever, and was surprised that didn't make the top 2, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean
But
that shows more than just like understanding Lego. It also like they really understood the brief, right? And I
yeah.
was also kind of surprised of like how much we're kind of like pseudo Star Wars. Like
Hmm.
there was a couple people that like super leaned into, like we had the Droid Factory, right? We had like a Jedi Academy, and I think we had two of those. But
Yeah.
then we had like this puppy world. That's kind of like, is it a Star Wars challenge, or are we just like, do we just have Star Wars stuff running around to be Star
Yeah.
Wars?
Well, it was like, or the hospital one where you're like maybe a little too on the nose, but at least they like, there was ones where you could tell like they just included Star Wars characters, and then ones that were like
Right.
very much like Star
Aware of
Wars.
the source material. And I
Yeah.
guess that's a happy medium for like people, if you don't really like Star Wars, right?
Hmm.
Like, but I don't know. Yeah.
But it's a fair point of like, did you understand the assignment? You know what I
Right.
mean? So, I don't know, Grinch. What were your thoughts on like any of those middle ground contenders, or what would have been your approach to this challenge?
Oh, that's a fun question. Um, my initial reaction was let's build something sideways.
Oh,
And like you said, I forget the team that did it, but there was the one that they were kind of building sideways and they're like, oh, let's put a jet engine over here. And I feel like they kind of did that because they were just trying to explain like, oh crap, like ours is sideways. It's like, but they could have really told a nice story with that, right?
yeah. They
Like
could have
you
been
could
like
have
the
had,
planet is off balance and they are trying to
yeah,
fix it. You know?
you could have had one on the other side and it was exploded. And then
Yeah.
you were building off of that side. And again, I think part of the reason I didn't like the challenge is because like it was a level plane, but it was raised off the ground. So you're looking kind of directly at the center point, right?
But maybe like that's where
So
forced
if you turn
perspective
it,
really could have
yeah,
been
if you turn it
interesting.
sideways, you could have a whole city on there and you could see some,
Hmm.
some of the city roads or whatever, or had stuff flying around. I mean, there could have been so much more than just, you know, I'm going to build on this flat surface like this. I felt like that was kind of too
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
Not that I could build well. I'm the creative type. I'll generate the idea.
Here was the other
somebody else,
thing that
somebody
I
else could
think
execute it.
was kind of a challenge, or something I didn't see a lot of, and I would have to go back to see if anyone did this particularly well, but nothing stood out to me as being homogenous with respect to the base planet underneath it. I didn't see a lot of
Hmm.
continuation of that planet. So like
I think there
someone
was
had like
one
a
where they did the waterfall, right?
yes, yeah, but even then, it didn't see like the color scheme continue. And maybe like the brothers who won did with their mountain. I don't remember. It just didn't seem like there was a lot of thought given into like, we got a
Yeah.
desert planet, so let's make this
So
a
this is
desert utopia.
right.
Like, so yeah, I don't know. That was kind of an interesting thing too.
We've got the
So
blue milk factory on this desert utopia, and they got a giant. I mean,
yeah,
that was some of the creativity I think I was looking for.
yeah, maybe a little more. Not, I wouldn't even say like respect, but acknowledgement of the the Star Wars ness of the
Mm-hmm.
challenge, right? So, but let's get into our bottom two. Our bottom two were Nick and Kendall, and Marcella and Crystal, and Nick, Krista, and Nick and Kendall had the little. It was a karaoke kind of temple setup, but it was a very minor or small build, kind of then set amongst like a kind of grassy um, undergrowth on this planet. And then Marcella and Krista had an interesting Jedi Academy approach, but it was one level, it was flat. And what I thought was interesting is they referenced rooms, but everything was in the open, surrounded by kind of a built up brick wall. And that was kind of the extent of the building they put on it. So when it was compared to some of the other planets where there was more vertical elevation, while they had a lot of detail in there, it just didn't feel very, big. And for Nick and Kendall, I think they implied that there was some struggle with time management from those two.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really see
We
it
didn't see it.
play out.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. And then I actually thought the detail work in their building was really good. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's what they were referencing, was like, you guys put way too much time into the details of like this one story little building and really needed to get higher. So, anyways, I thought that was kind of interesting. Grinch, what were your kind of takes on those teams at the bottom?
I remember just like looking at them being like, they kind of look the same.
Yeah.
And again, I think when you're getting a challenge like this, it's really important to like not only understand the brief, but then kind of like I said, of like understand the constraints of what the rules of the challenge are providing.
Yeah.
It's a suspended thing, right? You're building at eye level, and they both kind of just built really flat.
Yep.
And if you're gonna do that, turn it sideways, right? Where's the, it's like if they're like, hey, build a skyscraper, and you come up and you come up with something this big. It's like, okay, I understood the brief because I built a skyscraper, but I built a micro skyscraper.
Right.
I should have built something tall. And on the in the Lego Master Australia, they try to build a tower really tall, and so they actually had the opposite issue where they're like, I'm going to make it to the top.
Well, remember, was it last season they tried to do the rug, and he tries to
exactly.
And they ended up counting it out, and they were like, you would have to put this many bricks down a minute in order to meet the detail. And I think that was their elimination, wasn't it? That mother and son team. And
no, they used the golden brick.
Okay. Yeah. But that was almost their problem, was like they were too ambitious. But usually ambition is rewarded in the show. So I think if there's ever a risk of like, do we go over and above and beyond, or do we, stick to like a lower scheme? I think it's always better to kind of shoot for something bigger, right? Because you can always sort of pivot if you need to in the long run. So,
right.
But yeah, right. that was something I thought. That reminded me of the Duck Bricks win with the roller coaster, where he was really excited about that build mechanism he had. And I think he said they made a big deal about Jamie apparently telling him that it wouldn't work. And then it did. But he was effectively just building a GBC mechanism into his roller coaster. I was like, I don't know how revolutionary or like big this is. I don't want to take away from the triumph of the Duck Bricks team, but I don't know. I just felt like they kind of blew that a little out of proportion. So, but anyways, we're not talking about season 4. We're talking about season 5, Grinch.
That's right.
What were your thoughts on those bottom two? Anything else for those bottom two contenders?
No, I mean, I'll echo what I said before. I bet if they kind of made it through, they might have been in the bottom 2 again, but I'm sure the product that they put out would have been much better.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately, as a fan of the show, kind of like what you're looking for, right?
Yeah. You know what bugs me too is when they don't do an elimination round, or when they do an elimination round on the first episode and then they don't do one later on. And you're like, clearly you guys are trying to meet an episode count. Like, why not give everyone a practice run first?
Oh, the team that we really liked,
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we talk about how like Lego Master as a whole finally, because I keep going to it, I keep biting my tongue.
Yep. So I guess a question, so we'll get to that in just a second, right?
Okay.
But question is thoughts on the episode, thoughts on the twist. Was it impactful? Kind of what's your take on this?
I don't like the twist.
Episode for episode, season 5. Good, bad, like
It was fine. Yeah. We haven't seen enough of the builders yet to judge the builders, right? I'm sure there's some really good builders here, and I'm sure we'll get to that. Well, I think what typically happens is episode 3 or 4, like a team kind of starts to pull away from me, and I'm like, aha, that's what I'm voting for. Mm-hmm. I've shared, I wish that they didn't do the one thing I'm not excited for this season is like the twist, right?
Yeah.
Just to be honest, because
if this is the level of twists that we're gonna get, and if it gets to this point where it's almost gimmicky, then yeah, I'm right there with you.
So that's I think it'll be a fine season. Yeah.
Thoughts on the finalists, implications. I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that you feel like storytelling is weighted more in US Lego Masters. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we saw that with Ian and Sage ending up in the top 2 here. Either that or the episode itself was trying to throw us off the scent, pun intended, by kind of showing them struggling and getting that bad critique, only to then put them into the finalists. But again, this is not a criticism of their build or the team. They sound and based off of what we've seen, seem like a fun group of kids and very motivated, and they seem like they're good builders. It's just the way that the show portrays it in the beginning feels like maybe that was sort of manufactured drama for the audience to sort of key in on, only to then put them into it felt almost jarring, I think. And so I'm curious if we're going to continue to see that trend of storytelling being valued, or the trend of kind of a jarring editing going on where they're trying to sort of throw you off the scent of something occurring.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would not be surprised if it's the latter.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of par for course for Lego Masters US is some of
US
that
anyways.
manufactured, some brick built drama. So
Yes.
yeah, thoughts on the season?
Yeah, good luck, builders. Apparently there's some twists coming.
Apparently. Maybe. Any early predictions on your end?
I forget their names. I wish I could see the builds. Was it Ben and Michael? No, they won.
Yeah.
It was like the people that got like third. Okay, I got a list of everybody here. John and Justin.
The DJ one?
Justin. No. They're not the wedding DJs. They were just the friends, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I liked them, and I want to see more from them.
Okay. Yeah, there was one, and I don't recall who did it, but there was a brick-built stone arc where there was bricks on the side construction of it, and that felt very that felt interesting for Lego Masters and for a first build. And I think their criticism was either not enough story or maybe just playing it safe, right?
Yeah.
And so again, we got kind of a clear indication from the judges. They wanted pizzazz, they wanted storytelling, and they wanted a blend of both, right? And I guess that doesn't seem on brand. That doesn't not seem on brand for Lego, if you'll allow me to use that double negative, right? Like Lego's always about playing well. It's always about the pop. You watch the commercials, right? This episode, and the theme of this episode was Rebuild the Galaxy, right? Which was their Lego Star Wars show that they put out last summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they were trying to lean into the whimsy a little bit with this one, instead of maybe some of the more technically and proficient builds, because that was sort of that, again, that was maybe the assignment. And maybe that was something that was clearly articulated to the builders, but I didn't feel like that was very well articulated to the audience. So
yeah,
I'm curious if that continues to be a trend this season of, us having to do a little mental gymnastics to kind of be like, what were they actually asked to do? Because it was never really well explained in the final cut of the episode. But
yeah, it was Alex and Tone who I was thinking of.
okay.
It was the chick. Sorry, I think it's the brothers. Oops.
Well, Grinch, overall thoughts
Oh my god.
on Lego Masters?
Can we do it? Can we talk about Australia? Because I've been biting my tongue for so long. Please. Okay.
Let's do it.
I feel like if you have not watched Lego Australia, Lego Masters Australia,
where can people watch it?
Tubi. It's free. TUBI. If you're in the US, I have no idea anywhere else. All of my criticism, and again, I like the US version, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it's there for entertainment, which ultimately it is. But like, the reality interpretation. Like it's trying to be this gimmicky contest show, whereas like I want it to be a Lego contest show, you know?
Hmm.
And I feel like while Australia does do their gimmicks, they do focus more on the building process. Some
Yeah.
of the episodes are long. I mean, some of the episodes are like an hour and a half or 2 hours at times. Sometimes they'll do like full mini builds beforehand where they're like, hey, build the closest replica to this, and the winner's going to get an hour head start or something like, they'll do like a really technical
Yeah.
challenge. And I also feel like there's only one judge. And I don't think that I like Amy and Jamie. I mean, Jamie Beard is goated as far as like Lego designers go. Like he's on the Mount Rushmore of Lego designers. But there's only one judge, and his name's Brickman, and he can therefore is very consistent with his feedback. And while storytelling is still clearly very important, I don't feel like there's ever really been a case where they're like, oh, like technically it wasn't up to par, but the storytelling was so good, and that's why you won today. And I won't get into the episode specifics, but there's times where literally they just give the winner a team will win back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
Because and just like when you're watching in the US and like something's clearly that good, they like to go for the shock and awe, the wow factor, right? The reality the drama of it all, right? Whereas they're really focused more on like the build itself, the competition aspect of it. They do their own gimmicks, like they introduced I think it was the cursed brick or the brick of death, I forget what they called it. And like he's like, oh, you get a something bad's going to happen to the team that has the cursed brick. Like instead of being eliminated, they got the cursed brick, and it was like, you guys get to start 5 minutes later than everybody. And you're like, okay, so it's clearly just a gimmick, though, right? It's not trying to like
really throw someone off their game.
Right. And they kind of like laughed, like, oh my God, 5 minutes. What are we going to do? And I feel like some of the comedy hits a little bit better too. Like with him, the guy, I guess he's a Australian comedian. I'm obviously not super familiar, but he seems like a Will Arnett of Australia sort of thing. But they'll do stuff where he's like, oh, like you get the golden brick, and so every round, like I get to do something special for you. So you tell me when you want your power up, and it'll be like, okay, I'm going to go to the brick pit and get all your pieces now. So he'll like literally walk over and like a butler thing and be like, okay, sir, today I brought you a 2x6, and you wanted some more 2x8s, and then he'll just like gently put those like it's not actually impacting the competition at all. It's just kind of there to be a bit, and the bit's still about the show though. Like it's not like I don't know. That's all I got.
I hear what you're saying, and I've only seen one episode of Lego Masters Australia. I need to watch more of it. I was impressed with just that first season and first episode, the scale of the build, the technicality of them. I think you had mentioned you felt like just by and large all the builders were building at like a higher level than the American ones. I think my challenge with this show here in the United States for the US Lego Masters version was especially last season, where you had the Duck Bricks team that just was kind of blowing people out of the water in some cases, and it almost got lopsided, and they were trying to sort of push other teams to get ahead, and it was just like, did you guys not vet this like very well to begin with? Because you had kind of the Duck Bricks team that was always doing really, really well, and then you had teams that got eliminated.
Which even they were like, we weren't mock builders before we came on the show, and that kind of annoyed me.
Yeah. And that definitely, it felt like, I'm not going to say it felt like it was staged or predetermined, or there was,
it's just like I said, it's all about the drama.
Yeah. It did feel though like there was very much a separation fairly early on of teams that were good, teams that were not good. And then you kind of get those middle episodes where there's some teams that are just kind of hanging on.
It's like, let's trim the fat and move on.
Right. And you're just kind of like, man, it would have been better if kind of everyone was competing at a high level here. And it's just hard to tell, right? It's hard, like we mentioned, if there's, clock anxiety or what's going on that's kind of affecting these builders. it would be interesting to hear from some of the teams eliminated early. Like, do they feel like they got a fair shake or fair representation on the show, or was something else going on that we just weren't aware of?
Well, and so going back to Australia, you really need to watch it because it aired a full year earlier than the US one. So they're on season 6 right now. I think actually season 6 just wrapped. But they reuse
That's what
a
you were
lot of the
saying.
same
Yeah.
contest, right? And challenges. So you can literally, I mean, it becomes less subjective when you're like, oh, let's go watch the Star Wars one and how they executed it, and let's watch the Star Wars one and how they executed it in America. And I don't
Yeah.
mean the builders, I just mean the production crew, right? Because
hmm
even like they're building in like a warehouse, whereas like in America they're really building on like a stage, right?
Yeah.
Like that's very
It's very clear it's a
obvious,
set. Like,
right?
yeah.
And so the other biggest difference too, I think, is in kind of going back to some of what we've talked about is they sometimes will eliminate a team on round one, but they have, they do a elimination build. So you'll go into it and they'll be like, hey guys, today is not an elimination build. You're building
hmm
for an advantage. And the advantage is usually like you start earlier or something like that. It's nothing
Yeah.
major. So they'll be like, okay, you're building for an advantage today. And then, hey guys, today is going to be an elimination build.
Yeah. And to the point you made about how it seems like the US one is recycling the Australia one, the other kind of thing I think I struggle with the US season is you can tell there's sort of a pattern to the way that they do their episodes, right? We know at some
100%.
point there's going to be some sort of vehicle episode where something is going to have to move, right? We got this with go-karts, we got it with boats, we got it with RC cars, right? There was sort of an RC
We've
dirt
done
track
RC cars a
thing.
couple times. Yeah.
Yep. There's always an exploding episode, and those ones are fun visually, but you see enough of them and you're like, okay, like what's the other way this thing can like how do you introduce this again in a way that's novel? It does start to feel a little recycled and retread. And
The
that's
ones that I would like to see recycled would be like the bridge episode. Like they haven't done a bridge since
yeah.
season 1.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of things that you could do that's and lean into the fact that like Lego is STEM, right? Like you're building things. Hey, which team, one of the things that they do right is they don't really ever describe the limitation of bricks that they have. But that would be an interesting challenge of like you actually don't get that as many, or like the brick pit has been cut in half and you need to build as tall of a tower as you can using plates and Technic or something, like just give them like a weird sort of combination that they have to figure out and really see how those people explore things, or to your point, right, like make it clear it's not an elimination challenge up front. I think the earnestness of the Australian show almost makes it a little bit more enjoyable to watch, whereas with the American one it's kind of there's you can tell there's like a little bit more to the production. It's a little bit flashier and showier, and it just I don't know. I think over 5 seasons now, it's kind of worn me down. And I think you were definitely there way before I was.
I didn't realize I was. I mean, I still really enjoy the show, but I'm actually looking something up real quick. I didn't think I was going to come to this, but let's see. Yeah, so typically, I think with season 1, right, there was eight contestants,
Mm-hmm.
and because of the way that they do it with the, hey, this is going to be just a challenge. This is going to be an elimination challenge. Today we're doing, just this build, and the winner will whatever, right? They just not everyone's an elimination challenge, and it's literally like every other.
Yeah.
So there's 8 teams, and then season 1, I don't remember exactly how many episodes it is. I was trying to look it up real quick while we were talking, but I never use IMDb on the desktop, so I have no idea where I'm going. Season 1 had, I guess season 1 had 9 episodes, but they're longer episodes, right? So they did the smaller build first, and then they got into the elimination challenge. So I think they're like hour 15
Mm-hmm.
episodes. So it definitely feels like a lot more content, right? And you get some seasons are like 12 episodes and there's still only 8 teams.
Yeah. And
So
I think that's cool, you know.
you're getting more time with the builders.
What did you think? There was a few seasons ago where they introduced a team midway, and I think
I
you
hated
really,
that.
I did too. I felt like that was really
Like
unfair.
going back to the competition of the thing.
Right.
And I hated it because I was like, okay, they're going to win because maybe clearly they're just way better builders.
Yeah.
And then they got eliminated. And then, quite frankly, the team that won, I did not think deserved to win. So,
Did they make it to the finals?
no.
Yeah, I thought they got eliminated kind of mid.
Kind of. Was
like,
that season 3, right?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, that one was an odd one because, like you said, the implications of a team entering halfway into the episode seems to feel like
Not episode, season.
Season. Apologies. Thank you.
That's okay. I'm just clarifying.
Yeah, that it seems to be that like the producers are acknowledging like, yeah, these guys are better builders, and so to keep things fair, and it's like, well, why not just keep them up front, right? Like, it seems odd. I don't know if their vision came out in the execution of the show, and I think ultimately the show itself suffered for it because it led to more questions than it did answers, and it did ultimately kind of taint the competition a little bit in a way that I don't think they were intending. So
that was the one with a lot of Canadians.
That was season 2, wasn't it? The Canadian season?
That was season 3.
Okay. Yeah. And maybe these guys weren't the Canadian ones because I don't think they were Canadian, but
no, they were, because I remember the exact one where they got eliminated, and I felt like they shouldn't have got eliminated. It was the mini putt one, I think.
Okay.
And it was the one where the winners were in the bottom 2 literally like 3 times in a row, and they were like fighting, and then they won.
Yeah.
And I disagreed with that.
Yeah. But yeah. No worries.
IMDb is all sorts of messed up. They've got like different episodes and different seasons here. It is wild.
So yeah, I mean, we're entering into a new season, lots of possibilities. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and it'll be interesting to see how these Lego Masters play out and ultimately what occurs. You know, we do know, much like previous competitions and American Idol, like people have gone on. I mean, Boone now works for Lego. We've seen designers. I think his name was Aaron, if I remember correctly, from season 2.
He was still season 1.
Was he season? No, this was another guy. He's now a designer for Lego too. The STEM teacher. Yeah, I think he was season 2.
He's season 1.
Okay. Yeah, but he works for Lego.
His bicep, bro. I don't remember if they're brothers or friends.
I think they were friends.
But yeah, he also works for Lego.
Yeah. So you don't have to win to necessarily like win. If that makes sense, right? If that's your end goal.
There's a life message there, folks.
Dude, there is. So yeah, I don't know, Grinch. I'm cautiously excited, but we'll see how this plays out. So
I always enjoy Lego Masters. I feel like I'm rolling my eyes more and more at Will Arnett now.
That's probably fair. Well, now that we've seen it executed a few times, I do think, you have to kind of figure out like what's your vision for this show, and is there a long-term vision, or are you just kind of winging it each season? So
well, and the thing that I think it bothers me, because contrary to the Lego Masters Australia, where you do get a lot more build time, you get a lot more of like the process. Here you don't, and that I want more of that. So it's like, not only do I not think that it's funny, and I think it's gimmicky and eye rolling, it's also, I'm like, but I'm getting this instead of that. So then it becomes frustrating, right?
Yeah. And here's the deal. I think getting Will Arnett to do this show was like perfect. I have no beef with Will Arnett. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely not.
I have no beef with Brickmasters Amy and Jamie. I think usually they provide very good feedback, and I wouldn't say agree with all of their decisions, but I think generally, the people who deserve to go on, and the people who don't. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting situation, and we'll see, how more of this plays out. So I think I've said this is an interesting season a few times now in this episode. So
you might have. It'll certainly be interesting.
Yes, it'll be very interesting. So
All right. Well, I think, we wanted to chat about Lego Masters. We don't necessarily want to do a full episode review every single week. So this was kind of our season 5 primer Lego Masters discussion, meta discussion as well. So um, I think that's it. Wes, did you have anything else, or should we head over to Brickmail, or should I say, should you head out on a well-earned retreat and I head over to Brickmail?
well, other than just acknowledging how interesting this episode or the season's going to be this year, uh, no, I will say, Grinch, maybe we do take the time in what we're building to just sort of update. Anything stands out, we'll call it out that episode.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, to your point, I don't expect us to do episode by episode recaps of this by any means. I'm sure we'll talk about the finalists, and we'll kind of do probably like an end of season, just like, hey, what were your thoughts, and anything stand out to you. But other than that, I think this is pretty much our take on Lego Masters season 5. Interested to hear what any of our listeners think about this. If they think maybe our criticism's a little too harsh, if they agree, if there's other versions of this show, we know there are other versions of the show. Are there other ones that are worth watching? Because that would be an interesting question too, right?
Right.
Because there's certainly non-English versions of this show that's out there. I did see something about a Lego Masters worldwide thing, but it was odd to see a lot of Australians in it for some reason. So
because they're the better builders, mate.
Well, maybe. So
I hope my Australian accent doesn't offend anybody.
I liked it.
Awesome. I'll tell everybody that my brother liked it.
All right, Grinch. Well,
let's head over to some brick mail.
Let's do it.
Brick mail. All right, so that was the topic for this week. Now I'm going to head over to some brick mail. It is just me again. So first up on the brick mail, we have Bob. He says, hey guys, the show continues to be impressive. Thanks for doing them. I saw that the prize machine is coming out on June 4th, released on lego.com, so you can discuss it. I do appreciate how you separate fact from fiction and rumors. There's a lot of discussion on Reddit over the pricing of this set, and it reinforces the point being made about the $5 minifigure price included in the sets. Not sure if you guys caught this, and I wanted to bring it up. This is almost seems to confirm the hypothesis. Yes, it certainly does, doesn't it, Bob? I think definitely more fuel to the fire, and just something to kind of maybe keep an eye on. I think Lego's really realized, and I think they've known this for a while, right? I think they always used minifigures to sell sets, right? That's why sometimes there's an inclusion in a set that it doesn't necessarily make sense or something like that. But I think now they're really starting to actually just also price the minifigure at a premium, whereas before it was perhaps a way to sell the set. It is now part of the entire sale, right? So no more discounts on minifigures, it seems. Thanks for writing in, Bob. Up next, we have Duncan Bros. He says, love the pod and just wanted to know if your guys' opinion on Clone Army customs. I personally love them, and if you guys would ever do a custom set versus official set episode. I don't really have an opinion on Clone Army customs. I know West doesn't either. So neither here nor there. There's nothing wrong with them. I think some of them look really, really cool, and can sometimes be frustrating because you're like, if a custom person can do this, why can't Lego? But other times, yeah, I don't personally collect them, so I don't have too many comments there. And then the question on, would you ever do a episode on custom sets versus official sets? And I think that's a hard one because it's such a large topic range. Certainly, if there's something that's ever topical that comes up, past examples that I could think of would be like a Venator comparison of a really commonly used mock. It's just the custom mocks is really hard to compare to sets because there can be so many of them. B, it can be a little bit niche to do like a custom versus an official, and it's just such a large topic, right? But I think there's certainly ways that we could do it to make it interesting. Talking about maybe some of the advantages of a custom set, right, versus a official set. What can fan designers do that Lego can't, right? Lego set certain constraints because they need to make it accessible for everybody, whereas a fan designer is just kind of making the best version possible that they can, right, without having to worry about sourcing bricks for producing it, right, packaging it, making instructions that are easy to read, right, so using techniques that are accessible. So that's certainly kind of an area I could see that conversation going. So we will put it on the list, and kind of, as we are thinking about stuff, and if we can come up with an episode here, then we certainly will. We'll give it a shot. So thank you for writing in, Duncan Bros. Up last, we had Mr. Follow. He asked Mr. Follow. He asked a question, but we were going to save that for next week, for when West gets back, because he asked a question to both of us, and then that way we can both respond. Whereas, I knew the custom clone army custom question pretty easily. So we will get to your question next week, Mr. Follow. So that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at AFOLs Welcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.